What if I told you that 9 months ago, Lewis Hamilton said something so raw, so honest, and so alarming about his own future that it sent shockwaves through the entire Ferrari fanbase? And now that we're deep into the very season he was dreading, we finally get to find out if he was right to worry. So before we get into this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story connects something said almost a year ago to exactly what's happening on track right now, and the answer might surprise you. Now here's how this all started. It was the Las Vegas Grand Prix, late in the 2025 season, Hamilton's first year at Ferrari, and by that point in the year, it had already become clear this wasn't the dream debut anyone expected. He qualified dead last for that race, the first time that had ever happened to him on pure pace in 19 years of Formula One, and while he fought back gamely through the field, he couldn't find a way past Nico Hülkenberg's Sauber in the closing laps, finishing 10th on a night that summed up an entire season of frustration. And when he climbed out of that car and faced the cameras, he didn't hold anything back. He called it a terrible result, said there was nothing positive to take from the day, and then he said the line that would follow him for months. He said he was eager for the season to end, that he was looking forward to it being over, and when a reporter asked if that meant he wasn't looking forward to the next race in Qatar, Hamilton gave an answer that stopped everyone in their tracks. He simply said, "Next season, think about that for a second. A 7-time world champion, a driver who had just joined the most iconic team in the sport, essentially admitting on live radio that he wasn't looking forward to the upcoming year. The year fans were calling a fresh start, a reset, a chance for Ferrari to finally deliver a championship car, and Hamilton was telling the world he wasn't excited for it. So how did Ferrari's boss respond to a comment that serious, that publicly, that immediately? Well, Fred Vasseur didn't panic, and he didn't scramble to do damage control either. Instead, he did something that a lot of team principals wouldn't have the composure to do. He asked everyone to just calm down. He pointed out that jumping straight out of a car and giving your rawest reaction in that moment is always going to be a bit too much, and that the right move was to let things settle and actually discuss it properly after the team's debrief. He acknowledged that it had been a genuinely tough stretch for Hamilton, that the frustration was real and understandable, but he made it clear that the priority was staying focused on what was left of that season rather than reacting to emotion in the heat of the moment. And here's what's so interesting about that response. Vasseur didn't dismiss what Hamilton said, he didn't get defensive, he validated the frustration while still trying to steer the conversation back toward calm, professional focus. And if you know anything about how difficult driver relationships can become inside a struggling team, that kind of measured response is exactly the kind of leadership that either holds a team together or, if handled wrong, lets tension boil over into something much worse. And think about the alternative for a second. Imagine if Vasseur had reacted defensively instead. Imagine if he'd publicly pushed back on Hamilton or tried to minimize what he'd said in front of the media. That kind of response could have turned one raw comment into a genuine crisis, fueling weeks of stories about a champion regretting his own decision to join the team. Instead, by staying calm and giving Hamilton room to breathe, Vasseur avoided turning a single emotional soundbite into a much bigger storyline. And that's a skill that doesn't get talked about enough in this sport, knowing when to let a moment pass rather than reacting to every single headline. So did Hamilton's comment actually reflect how he truly felt, or was Vasseur right that it was just raw emotion talking? And more importantly, if a driver of Hamilton's stature can feel that low after just one bad weekend, what does that tell us about the mental toll of a genuinely difficult first season at a new team? Well, we actually got our answer just a few days later, because heading into the very next race weekend in Qatar, Hamilton was asked directly to explain what he'd meant, and this time, in a calmer setting, away from the sting of a fresh result, he gave a very different answer. He said he'd be surprised if any driver was genuinely excited about the year ahead, right at the tail end of a long, grinding season, when everyone's running on empty and just wants time with their families, he admitted. The comment came from a place of pure frustration, the kind that builds up after race that simply doesn't go how you hoped. And then he said something that mattered even more. He said he was actually excited to see what the team would build going into the new year, and that he wanted to keep growing with them. And just days after that, in an even more direct moment, Hamilton went even further, saying he had no regrets at all about the decision to join Ferrari in the first place. So in the span of about a week, we went from a 7-time champion sounding like he'd lost hope to that same driver clarifying that his passion for the project was still very much intact. That's an incredible swing, and it tells you just how much elite athletes are operating on a knife's edge emotionally after a brutal result, saying things in the moment that don't always reflect the bigger picture once the dust settles. And this pattern isn't unique to Hamilton either. We've seen it across the entire grid for years. Drivers giving devastatingly honest reactions moments after a race, only to sound completely different once they've had a night's sleep and a proper conversation with their engineers, which raises an interesting question for how fans should actually consume these moments. Should we treat a driver's rawest, most emotional comment as the real truth? Or should we wait and see what they say once the emotion has faded? Because if Formula One has taught us anything over the years, it's that the truth usually lives somewhere in between the two. Now here's where this story gets really interesting, because we're not just looking back at an old headline anymore, we're now living in the exact season Hamilton said he wasn't looking forward to. So the real question isn't what he said back in November, the real question is, was he right to be worried? And honestly, the early signs actually looked promising. Hamilton came into this year with real momentum. His form looked sharp, consistent, and for a stretch, it genuinely felt like he'd established himself as the clear leading force inside the Ferrari garage, ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc, but then Silverstone happened. Leclerc won that race, on Hamilton's own home soil, in front of his home crowd, and the momentum flipped hard. Leclerc followed it up by outperforming Hamilton again in Belgium and again in Hungary, 3 races in a row where the story of this season completely rewrote itself. And now, with the year heading into its most critical stretch, the gap between the two Ferrari drivers has narrowed to just 31 points. So here's the twist. Nobody was expecting back in November. The danger Hamilton seemed to be dreading wasn't really about the car or the team or even the championship fight with Mercedes. It turned out to be about something much closer to home, a genuine internal battle with his own teammate for status inside the same garage. And that raises a fascinating question. When Hamilton said he wasn't looking forward to this season, was some part of him already sensing this exact kind of pressure coming, the pressure of proving himself all over again, not against rivals and other teams, but against the driver sitting right next to him every single race weekend? Because if you think about it, that's an even more uncomfortable position for a 7-time champion to be in than simply chasing a title from behind. And here's another layer worth considering. Vassar's calm handling of that Las Vegas comment turned out to be exactly the right call, because imagine if he'd reacted differently back then. Imagine if he'd publicly criticized Hamilton for the comment instead of giving him space. That kind of mishandling could have created exactly the sort of fractured relationship that makes a difficult season completely unmanageable. And now, with Leclerc breathing down his neck in the standings, Hamilton needs every ounce of trust and stability he can get from his own team, not friction left over from a moment of frustration 9 months ago, which makes you wonder just how much credit Vassar deserves for quietly setting the tone that's allowed this rivalry to stay competitive rather than combustible, because team principals rarely get praised for the disasters that never happened, only criticized for the ones that did. So as we head toward the remaining races of this year, keep an eye on how Hamilton talks about pressure and frustration in real time, because if this season has taught us anything, it's that the loudest, rawest comment in the moment is rarely the full story, and the way a driver responds days or weeks later often tells you far more about where their head really is. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think Hamilton's comment back in Las Vegas was pure frustration talking? Or do you think some part of him already sensed the difficult year that was coming? And now that we're deep into this season with Leclerc closing the gap, do you think Hamilton still has no regrets about joining Ferrari, or is that patience starting to wear thin again? Drop your honest take in the comments right now, because I read every single one of them. Comment no regrets if you think Hamilton still stands by what he said in Qatar, or comment worried if you think his original Las Vegas instincts were right all along. If you want to see Hamilton turn this season around and prove that Ferrari move was worth it, smash that like button so more fans see this breakdown. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update, because we are tracking every twist in this story, every press conference, and every shift in momentum between Hamilton and Leclerc as this season heads toward its finish line. Thank you so much for watching. Drop your prediction below right now, and I'll see you in the next video the moment this rivalry takes its next turn.